Israel and his 12 sons lived in Egypt around 1800 BC. Over the next 300 years, the families of each of these 12 sons grew into clans, which grew into tribes of hundreds of thousands of people. The children of Israel were eventually enslaved by the Egyptians, but around 1446 BC, they were released and left Egypt, all 2 to 3 million of them. The descendants of Abraham were indeed now a nation called Israel. But they were not a great nation. They were not a company of nations. They did not possess the gates of their enemies. In fact, they possessed no land at all. But this roaming nation of Abraham's descendants eventually did settle into their own land, the land of Canaan. And according to Genesis, this was the same land God had promised Abraham. It is a documented historical fact that the nation of Israel existed and that it inhabited this land. That is a literal, physical promise fulfilled 500 years after it was made. The Bible records that this ancient nation of Israel was ruled by God Himself. God governed the nation through Moses, then through Joshua, then through a series of judges, and then through a monarchy. Israel's monarchy came into existence around 1050 BC, and with this monarchy came an extraordinary development, another promise. I will set up thy seed after you, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before you. Thy throne shall be established forever. What a covenant! What a promise! The God of the Bible promised to preserve this throne, David's throne, forever. In fact, this God said He would make David's throne His own throne. Then Solomon sat on the throne of the Eternal as king instead of David his father. Again, this covenant, this promise, is surprisingly detailed. First, this specific throne would be ruled by a descendant of David every generation, generation after generation after generation. This would last not for 100 years or for 1,000 years, but literally forever. Second, the promise specifically addresses what would happen if Solomon or other descendants sinned. David's predecessor, Saul, sinned, and God had punished him by taking away his throne and ending his dynasty. But the promise specifically states that even if David's descendants sinned, God would not take away the throne, as I took it from Saul. God would punish them, but would not break the covenent. David's descendants would still go on ruling forever. Third, God specified when this promise would take effect. It would happen not just sometime in the future, but immediately, with David's immediate successor, his son Solomon. From Solomon on to eternity, David would always have a descendant ruling the descendants of Israel. This means that if there was ever a single generation when this was not the case, this promise failed. How bold! A detailed covenant that would last forever, promising a continuous line of kings starting around 1000 BC and never ending. The God of the Bible did not leave an escape clause. The more you read, the more He doubles down on this promise. If ye can break my covenant of the day and my covenant of the night, and that there should not be day and night in their season, then may also my covenant be broken with David my servant, that he should not have a son to reign upon his throne. David's descendants did have an ongoing royal line. History records an unbroken line of kings descended from David that ruled for about 400 years. But what happened after those 400 years? Did God take away the throne as a punishment for sin? He specifically promised to preserve David's throne, even if the one sitting on it sinned. Was this eternal throne perhaps established in Jesus? Well, if so, the promise had already been broken for the 600 years before Jesus. And why didn't Jesus literally rule a literal nation? Will this eternal throne go to Christ at his second coming? The Bible says yes. This is how it will last for eternity. But how can you believe that part of the Bible promise if other parts failed? The truth is that the other parts didn't fail. God has kept and will keep every one of his promises. You can stake your life on that. The story of how he did so is one of the most inspiring stories in history.